This is the BTOWN podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome in to another edition of the BTOWN podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Today, we circle back with BTOWN regular Ben DeCastro. Always a pleasure to have Ben DeCastro here on the program. He was guest number 2, actually, way back in 2018 when this podcast was launched. And it has been, a great honor to spend time with all of you out there each and every Tuesday and Friday, and in some cases much more often than that over the last couple of years. So really appreciate all of your support. Now, Ben, of course, is a social media influencer. You can watch his program Carpooling with Ben on Facebook and YouTube. You can also hear him from time to time on the radio on Cat Country as part of the morning program and on WJAR on Studio 10 as a television contributor and much more than that as well. So we get into a couple of things today. First of all, how COVID has impacted his work recently in terms of broadcasting and communicating in general. And then we kind of get into an assessment of the communication strategies that the governor's office has deployed, if you will, in recent times. And, again, not to really spend a whole episode Monday morning quarterbacking, but to sort of consider where we're at right now in terms of the COVID numbers, in terms of the COVID strategy that's being utilized here in the Ocean State, and how the communication efforts have played into where we are right now. Of course, the field hospitals are open. They're taking patients, and we're seeing significant numbers here in the Ocean State. We're seeing significant numbers of hospitalizations, folks in the ICU, folks on ventilators. At the same time, we are seeing progress being made in terms of therapeutics, undoubtedly, because we're seeing so many more confirmed positive cases and finding ways through therapeutics to keep the death count, to keep the ICU numbers down, below where they would be had we gone to these types of numbers in the spring. So we kind of break all that down, give some opinion on that, and it's an interesting conversation, as always, with Mr. Ben DeCastro. Now, coming up next week, I guess on the Friday episode, we're going to kind of start to break down 2020, our year in review. So just like last year, we'll have a panel discussion on some of the biggest stories, which I think we can kind of figure that out. But in terms of assessing them, in terms of assessing where we're at right now, we'll have that panel discussion for you next Friday. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to have the top 20 episodes of 2020. I'm looking at a couple of things for the determination of that. It's not particularly scientific in every sense because I'm looking at the total download numbers. I'm looking at the download numbers of episodes that, let's say, came out in like January or March. Are they still being listened to here in December? I'm listening to you as well. You can tweet at me at Bill Bartholomew. You can send me an email, bill@ripodcast.com, or get a hold of me on Facebook or Instagram through a direct message. And you know what? I'm very curious about your own opinion on which episodes helped you navigate COVID the most, provided you with some entertainment or some insight. And we'll put that list together, and I'm still working on. In fact, I got the pad and pen to my right here, and I'm getting close to kind of understanding from a more scientific end which episodes were the most popular. But that's not going to be the only factor. I also will share my opinion on which episodes I think were the most, important or interesting. But that's coming up in 2 weeks. A week from today, we'll have our kind of year in review panel discussion and one more quote-unquote regular episode next Tuesday. So I can't express to you all how much I appreciate all of you spending time with me on this podcast, on social media, and even on the radio or television as we've kind of grown together through this year. I got that whole like Spotify year in review thing, like how many people are listening to your show or whatever. And we have just absolutely, we've grown by like 800%. this year. And that's because of all of you. That's because of all of you who are listening, sharing episodes, talking about this program, and trusting me with conveying relevant information and with trying to provide some entertainment as well. I know this isn't a comedy sketch program. I don't break out the guitar all that often. So it's a different kind of entertainment, but I just can't thank you enough. You know what I mean? And it's honestly a sincere honor. One of the great honors of my life to be able to spend time with you here on the podcast or otherwise. So I appreciate it. I'll say that again as the year comes to a wrap, but we were doing all right last year. Things were growing organically. I was staple gunning posters up around town. We had an audience for sure that existed and I was delivering this program to, but it has really changed this year significantly. And like I said, I'm looking at that number and going, wow, that type of growth. I haven't spent a penny on advertising or anything like that. And, you know, I'm really thankful for all of you because it's your trust that has put this thing into the next level. Okay, so quick couple of things business-wise. 2021 coming up. As always, well, as for the last 2 years, I will be taking off some time right around Christmas, New Year's, and into the first couple of weeks of January. I'll be using that time to sort of beef up, get some new production going. I've already got some stuff that I'm going to be adding to the podcast. I'm going to be getting some video stuff going. I'm going to be launching a more substantial YouTube channel, which will be different than the podcast, different than the TV show. It'll basically be another program that we're going to get into some national stuff, and you'll hear Ben and I talking about that today here on this episode. And a whole new podcast series that I've already started recording that is not to do with Rhode Island politics and media and news. Slightly different topic, and I look forward to launching that as well. So a lot going on. So I'll be using kind of the period at the beginning of 2021 to get that stuff beefed up. And but you know, there'll be plenty of episodes for you to go back and listen to that are timely if you need to get your fix of BTOWN. So I'd also be remiss if I didn't remind you that we are a listener-supported program. There's a few ways that you can help grow Bartholomew Town. One is to leave a rating and review wherever you're listening right now. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave the rating that you see fit. If it's 1 star, if it's 5 stars, that's your choice. Freedom of choice, folks. Another thing you can do is you can share an episode. You can do so on social media. You can send a text message with a link, whatever. Talk to people about it. If you want to go a step further, we've got a Patreon page, including the opportunity for exclusive content. God, that was weird. Exclusive content by becoming a BTOWN insider. For as little as $3 per month, you can help to sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that we've become known for. At that $10 per month level, you'll become a BTOWN insider and get that exclusive commentary episode every single month, featuring political commentators like Ted Nesi, Ian Donis, Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz, and myself. It's patreon.com/Bartholomew Town. All right, let's get right to it. He just lit up the Big Blue Bug, one of his big programs of this year and every year. He has a lot to say about the communication strategy of Governor Raimondo's staff. Is it effective? Is the COVID fatigue that a lot of people are experiencing at least partially due to a messaging process that the governor has deployed? We'll find out right now here on Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so we're coming off the heels of Nibbles hath been lit. There's some normalcy in this life. 2020 has not completely fallen out from under us. The bug has been lit. You are the host of that operation. It's sort of one of your signature events each year. But I guess, you know, from your perspective, you've really had to adapt your shows, your programming. A lot of the things you do have been completely faced complete upheaval in 2020, especially carpooling with Ben, because that's probably not Department of Health endorsed to sit with 40, 50 different people in a year in a car and drive around and talking to them into microphones.
You know, I got the Department of Transportation on board with it originally and said, look, the cameras start before we drive. And, you know, I'm not touching things. We're just literally driving and talking. And that was the whole spirit of it. Yeah. And you're right. It was an entire change to do it via Zoom or Skype, however we could do it. The thing that I found the hardest was the first couple episodes. I really had a hard time conducting the interview. And I think it was because it wasn't like I wasn't distracted by the road. If that's the right way to say it, I'm probably saying it the wrong way. But, you know, the whole intent of that program, Carpooling, when I originally, you know, brought it to the Cardi brothers and said, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. It was meant to be in the spirit of the first time you drive with somebody, that first time you carpool with somebody, it's that getting to know you. And it was more so than just promoting an event, more so than just promoting a charity group. It was, hey, who are these humans? Who are these people actually behind it? A little more in depth. And believe it or not, some of the biggest responses and reactions were the people who weren't, quote unquote, known figures in the public eye.
Yep.
You know, they have their own little following, and it went viral with them, but that actually surpassed some of the bigger guests that I've had. So it was really interesting to see that whole dichotomy and that whole just change, happen. Now we are obviously talking about more event-based stuff and how we can keep things going through this pandemic, and as we hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Let's hope.
Hopefully, hopefully we can get back to that at some point. But how the world has changed.
Yeah, it's. Look, I mean, I was just telling you before we started taping. I think I've now done 103 Zoom episodes.
Yeah.
And boy, is it different than being in person. There's nothing like that moment here at the studio. People would show up at the loft for a podcast taping. I'd go down to the parking lot to meet them. They're driving around in South Providence, potentially for the first time in their life. You meet them and then bring them into the building. That walk up the stairs is so important to just forming how the interview is going to go. And now it's literally, okay, sign on. Here we go. I've got another Zoom coming up in 45 minutes. So let's get to it. And you lose some of that human element. And we've lost so much of that in COVID. I just wonder, do you think that people have gotten comfortable without that human element, that it's going to be hard to go back to in-person, informal exchanges, that people are going to be more socially awkward, if you will, when we come back, and some people will prefer to stay in this digital mode?
I think there's two different types of people out there, and to be honest with you, Bill, I think that this is going to open up more opportunities, especially for folks like yourself who do an audio based. And I mean, you can obviously do video and whatnot, but there are people who won't be able to travel to talk to you, and that could be via a distance thing. They could be in another state, in another country. But even if it's local, they may not have been so up for the challenge of driving to your location to do it. Yeah. It's easier. It's less time consuming. On the other hand, I think there is a greater faction of people that will welcome the opportunity after what day of March is today? After being
Yes.
so long in this distance mode, I'll go a couple hours. I'll drive a couple hours to go somewhere, and it's funny because it's been a huge change. I mean, before COVID, I wasn't driving as much as I used to when I worked for Cardi's Furniture, direct in their office and, traveling to the stores and whatnot. I wasn't driving as much by myself. And every now and then when I would take a road trip, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so just kind of just pops a bunch of ideas in my head and just kind of gets the brain thinking in a different way. And now those 20-minute ride, those 30 minutes rides from the East Bay over to your place or to, to the other side of the state, that's not even happening as much as it had been. So really, I will gladly hop in the car. And I think a lot of people will, to do it once the vaccine's out, once everybody's, back. I think that will come back. So I'm hoping there's some lasting effect of this it will open the doors up for more creators, content creators like yourself to different kinds of interviews and different kinds of stories and topics.
Yeah, I think so too. I know you mentioned video, and I've kind of hinted at it here on the show, but I've got I've got a green screen, I've got lights in here, and I'm planning on launching a YouTube channel in 2021 that'll have more like a national lean to it. And there's no way I would have done that if it weren't COVID. You know what I mean? Yeah. My brain wasn't there, but now I'm thinking, all right, let's do it. I'm going to be here anyway. And now I might have a shot at getting a guest in DC or, I have people in New York I'd love to have on the show, but there's no way that they're driving up here or I'm driving down there for an interview or anything like that. So yeah, it does open up some doors that'll be fascinating to see where it goes.
There's an interesting video that's cycled around the internet millions of times. It's a rabbi who's talking about a lobster and his growth, and perhaps you've seen it. I forget the rabbi's name, but he talks about how in order for the lobster to grow, he's got to shed his shell, and when he knows to do that is when it hurts. Pain is the catalyst for growth. And yourself, myself, a lot of people, we're in this pain point of, hey, this is our livelihood, we've got to survive. we're feeling that pain of, okay, how are we going to do this? Okay, let's branch out. I mean, I've stepped up my home studio. I've added the lights like yourself. I've added, different accoutrements and whatnot, and figured out the way to make it work with a family and just do different things. But that pain point being COVID and the shutdown and all the various elements to go into it, that was the catalyst for the growth.
Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods. Or head over to our website, ripodcast.com. Hey kids, if you want to get in on the best of 2020, send me an email, bill@ripodcast.com, or tweet at me @BillBartholomew. I'm curious which episodes impacted you the most here in this most wild of years. Looking here at home in Rhode Island, where we're seeing these numbers that are just case count numbers that are kind of scary. I mean, let's be honest, the field hospital is opening up, and we still don't have a firm grasp on exactly what COVID is. But how is that affecting you personally? You know what I mean? Like, not even professionally, but is that affecting the way that you're navigating the world, so to speak, like even differently than October or something like that?
Sure. I mean, I believe you and I had talked about this just because we talk often in the beginning. It was really weird and different, interesting to see how people were reacting to it. And you, like me, very much a people person. There's parts of you that are introverted, just like me. There's parts of you that you like to be on the stage. You like to do the show. That's the whole thing. Yeah. You mentioned the Nibbles Woodaway lighting thing. How weird that was, being literally one of only a few people in that parking lot, where it's usually you got kids there and singing and all this other, and everybody's so happy to that single solitary thing. So it's been so weird figuring out how people are reacting to this. The people who you thought were I'm invincible, don't worry about me, about anything, they have been the most scared, and frightened by this, not in a bad way, but that's just how they're dealing with it. And people who I thought were like the hypochondriacs of the world, they're the ones that want to come up and give you a hug. It's like, whoa, wait a second, let's not get too cozy here. I know you're my wife, but I'm gonna pay for that one. But it's, for me personally, my biggest issue has been the dissemination of information coming down from, whether it be governmental leaders, whether it be medical leaders. Everything has been, and how it's been skewed in different ways. I mean, it's horrible that we've lost as many people as we have had. Yep. As we have. We haven't lost how many they were originally predicting, which is a huge credit to the medical community and to people, doing what they can and respecting the virus. But, that number of deaths necessarily isn't the indicator right now. It's not the most important thing right now. Right now, we've got to worry about, can we provide the medical care and these relief valves of these field hospitals. To be honest with you, I think they should have opened them up a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
get them going.
Sure. Looks like
why are we going to wait until we're to the point where we absolutely need it? But again, I'm not the person making the decision. There are far more intelligent doctors and leaders and executives making that decision there to do what they need to do best. But the hospitalization rate, you're right, is alarming, but I'm encouraged by the fact that we're not seeing the level of people on ventilators. We're not seeing the level of people dying in ratio proportion to what we saw in the springtime. We have a much better understanding of it that way. We also have therapies and treatments. So yes, the spread is alarming, but I think if people can grasp the fact that, look, it really is now, we're closer to the light at the end of the tunnel than we ever have been. I mean, it's kind of cliche to say that, and it's obvious, but that's where we're at. So I think what bothered me the most was I became fatigued with hearing constantly. I, like you, we consume these press conferences, we consume these reports that come out and the people who break down the information consistently, and the fatigue and the fact that the people doing this have not taken a break, I half understand it. But on the other half, it's like, wait a second, we need a relief valve here.
Yeah,
we need our own kind of break, just in general.
Yeah, I'm surprised when you look back at it now, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it, I guess, but you think about when we started to see the dip in numbers that was significant, yet the press conferences and the tone wasn't all that different than what we see now, as literally field hospitals are opening, and there's all this confusion around schools and their openings, and we see the issues now with gyms where some gym owners are defiantly saying, hey, look, we're opening no matter what shutdown provisions are put forth. And you wonder, okay, if you can turn up the heat a little bit at the right moment, does that sort of get everybody to go, okay, a 2-week pause might actually benefit us in the long run, financially, in a business sense, and obviously in a medical sense. So we'll take it seriously. But we've gotten to a point now where I think by and large, a tremendous amount of people are either numb to it or fatigued, like you said, or they're also just pushing back for the sake of pushing back. And certainly legitimately, in some cases, there are businesses that are saying, hey, look, we can't survive this because the stimulus isn't there to get us through. So that is, to me, the big issue right now, is that the pieces aren't in place to execute what really should be executed, which is probably a shutdown with everyone simultaneously being paid to stay home and businesses being paid to get through the period properly, and for whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it is. But we can't do that. The finances aren't there, and I don't think the public support is there at this point because of that fatigue that you mentioned.
No, you're right there. The public absolutely won't go for it. You look at this 2-week pause that we're in the middle of, at least while we're doing this taping here. I know so many people that, look, we're Rhode Island, okay? In minutes, I co-host the Wicked Roadie podcast, and we do this thing called Borderline. No matter where you are in Rhode Island, you're never more than 18 and a half miles away from Connecticut, Massachusetts, or the water. Yeah. So, I mean, you can cross the line real easily and do business in these other states. These gyms that are closed are not closed in Massachusetts. So a lot of people are crossing the border and, okay, well, I'm going to go there for a few weeks. And that few weeks, Bill, that few weeks may turn into, well, why am I going to go back? I think a lot of this came, and you mentioned Monday morning quarterbacking, and I don't necessarily call it Monday morning quarterback, when in March we were saying on various platforms to Governor Raimondo, why have you not brought in Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah.
He is a duly elected position, independently elected nonetheless. It's not, can you imagine us going through this with a Republican lieutenant governor? Because that's happened.
Sure.
We've had two different parties, governor and lieutenant governor.
Yep.
They don't run on the same ticket. And what would have happened if Governor Raimondo, God forbid, would have contracted the illness? Now we're at a point now where we're on, watch to see if she's going to up and relocate and take a position in the Biden administration. Dan McKee is literally the lieutenant governor. I hate to not say Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee. I know he listens often, and I mean no disrespect by it, Lieutenant Governor, but he's literally been pushing the programs that they've put forth, meaning the Raimondo administration. He's been out there hitting the pavement, but I mean she won't even say his name.
Yeah,
Brett Smiley. Who the heck cares that he's on the stage? He shouldn't be. He's not elected. The health department, the Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, Dr. McDonald, they're experts. I get it. Have them on stage. We need answers from them. But the fact that she's not even has not brought him in for a press conference, and by his own admission, and she laughs it off, and as she has in the past, it's like, that's where, that's not Monday morning quarterbacking. We've been calling that since the game started.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest faults, because to get back to messaging and the fatigue, a lot of people are sick and tired of listening to her. There are licensed professional counselors out there, mental health professionals, who are doling out the advice of stop watching the governor's press conference as their advice to their patients, their clients. That's not good.
No.
That's not good. And a lot of it is because you're right. In the summertime, when we're still, nothing changed from those daily press conferences. The feel, the flow, the tenor, the way it was delivered once by Raimondo, then delivered a second time by Dr. Scott there. It was like, you're not changing it up. Why are you're only doing this once a week? Why are you giving me numbers just from the day before?
Right.
And
right.
So I think she's been really underserved by her communication staff. I think they have done they've been very weak, and whether it's them being weak or her being stubborn not to listen. But last week she came on Gene Valicenti's show and said, I was surprised by the fatigue. Well, if you're surprised by the fatigue, that shows me that you haven't been listening and you haven't been paying attention to what's really going on out there. You've been so ignorant to the overall. And look, people should be able to make their own decisions. And that's where, you and I differ on things, and I've said that from the beginning. Look, let the people make the decisions, put the restrictions out there. I've never thought that a whole shutdown would be good, but I think the delay in messaging to those hardest hit areas that we're seeing right now, the Central Falls, those areas, those zip codes in Providence, Pawtucket, and even just different communities, I think the underserving there in the beginning has been tough. You could have focused your energies there.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, but I really hope. It's nobody had the perfect answer, and I'm sorry for going off on a tangent here. Nobody had the perfect answer. Nobody still has the perfect answer, but there are things that you got to bring more people into the room here, into the picture. If you're the governor, to get a feel for what's going on. I think she's just been, and her staff, I think they've just had her so shielded from that. It's been, it's really, I think it's damaged, honestly. I think it's damaged the Democratic Party here in the state.
I'm just surprised. I totally agree that we haven't heard from the lieutenant governor on any kind of regular basis. I spoke with him last night. I was on a live stream with him for like 30 minutes, and his office, they're carving out ways to get funds and distribute funds to individuals, businesses, so on and so forth. And you would think that he would have just been tasked with that project. This is the governor's, one of the things that she's had the most pushback on is distribution of the CARES Act dollars. Why not make that a project for the lieutenant governor's office, who are already working on it, to delegate them to manage that aspect of things, and the governor could oversee it at a certain level. But at the same time, it does feel like we're at a point now where you've got fatigue, you've got confusion or potential problems with the distribution of the safety net funding. And as you mentioned, nursing homes, Central Falls, South Providence, Pawtucket, West Warwick, Woonsocket, these are problem areas that were problem areas in March, and there are still huge gaps. There's not brick and mortar testing sites. You've got the private sector in Central Falls, a private pediatrician that stepped up to basically run the state's, to run testing. She's herself spent $40,000 on PPE and an Abbott testing machine. So why are we not seeing that triage in the right areas?
And it didn't have to be a factor of, giving Lieutenant Governor carte blanche over the CARES Act money. She could have very easily said, the governor could have very easily said to Dan McKee, the Lieutenant Governor, look, I'm going to allocate $150 million to you, or $50 million, or $100 million. You do it.
Yeah.
This is the money. You do it. let me know how we're doing it. If you have questions, but this is, take care of that. That would have opened her up and the management. If she's going to Washington, D.C., she is going to have to learn to let other people do things because I've been surprised by the people who can't stand the governor, who have said, no, I don't want her going to D.C. I don't want her going there because, she's going to, I want her, let's keep her here for 2 months. It's like, no, if you get her there, this is the analogy. If you pee in a swimming pool, people notice. If you pee in the ocean, well, yeah.
Maybe a starfish notices here and there.
Yeah, barely. But I mean, it's like, I just saying. I'm sorry for the analogy, but that's kind of where my mindset is at.
It is interesting to see, and the way that it's kind of been broken down, where people who may have been Raimondo supporters before are now against her on business grounds, and people who were against her on political grounds are in some ways now saying, hey, look, I think she did a great job in getting the infrastructure built to the point that she did, at least this summer. But she's in a problem area now. I'm sure she knows it. It'll be interesting to see whether she stays or goes. And hey, we got a lot more to talk about in 2021. That's for sure. So
certainly true. Listen, I don't want to end the move on or end the episode without saying this. I think in the beginning, I think she did as best a job as she could. You've often talked about it, that Sunday morning where you got that notification of, hey, there's a press conference. And it's gonna, this is and Bill Haberman over on WPRO on a Sunday, on the air. That was a day of like that'll stick out. And I think in the beginning, when we're so many unknowns, I think in the beginning there was that she did a great job, but she rested too much on her laurels on that part and didn't creatively adapt as time went on.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly where we're at right now. So, Ben DeCastro, ladies and gentlemen, I know you got to run. You've got a robust schedule coming up here.
Yeah, we're having some fun. We're doing some stuff. Like you, I have taken a shine to the glorious television. You over there on Rhode Island PBS, WSBE, with the great programming there. I'm doing some stuff for Studio 10. I got some satellite interviews. So, do they do makeup for you?
No makeup here.
Really? Wow.
And no
because
hair
you have that youthful
either.
Complexion. You don't have those. You don't have those dark circles under the eyes like I do.
I don't know. I've heard that I ought to invest in a makeup kit and comb immediately from a few people. So
don't you do it. Hey, listen. If it wasn't good enough for the cool moose, you don't do it either. You look
Bingo.
great. You keep those glorious locks because one day I'm going to be super jealous of them. I already am.
This is the BTOWN podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.